Good morning, Dog Nation. I am Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. I told our video audience a moment ago that kind of my first time sort of wearing, at least in this stage of 2024, the long sleeves. I haven't worn long sleeves in the show in a while, but it sort of felt like a fallish morning today. Good chance to do that. We are fired up about all the football we're going to see this weekend. Both outstanding game here tonight for us on the Peachtree Sports Network involving a couple of Georgia targets. We'll tell you about that today. Getting you ready for Georgia, Mississippi State tomorrow, and around the Dogs, what a weekend it's going to be. A lot will be learned. And as we've said earlier this week, we have more data points on Georgia because of the schedule that it's played than almost anybody else in college football. So therefore, we're probably more aware of Georgia's imperfections maybe than some of the other teams that Georgia's competing with. But starting tomorrow, that starts to change. There are some teams that are kind of, skating by, playing what's essentially fake competition, but it starts to get a little bit more real for them here right now. We'll find out if they're ready for that challenge. So here it is today. A lot on Georgia, Mississippi State, the busy weekend around it, major recruiting visitors. We talked about Elijah Griffin yesterday. We'll hammer that hard again today there as well. And just get you ready and fired up to be back between the hedges tomorrow, where I know everybody is going to answer the call from Kirby Smart and make a whole bunch of noise there between the hedges tomorrow. So what do you say we get it started? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I have always loved, sports radio. Now, I know that that's not everybody's cup of tea. I totally understand that. But I've always loved it. It was one of the first jobs I ever really dreamed of having. I want to be like a sports talk host. And obviously, we sort of do this show in a way that sort of feels like sometimes that kind of sports talk type deal here. I grew up listening to sports radio. I used to love sort of the old school sports radio stuff, like a Friday. You ever grow up listening to the old school sports radio show? Sometimes on a Friday this time of year, they'd come on and be like, hey, it's a football Friday. You ever hear that old school sort of sports talk lingo? Hey, we're getting ready for a football Friday. I was thinking about that this morning because to me, this sort of feels like a football Friday. I mean, this just sort of feels like one of those days where you're trying to get your 8 hours in, you're trying to clock out, you're trying to get home, trying to get in front of a TV or in front of an outdoor fireplace or get your beverage in hand, get you a good something or another on the grill or whatever else, and just get settled in for a football Friday and rolling into a great football weekend. Many of you planning on being in Athens tomorrow. I know you're going to be loud, as Kirby Smart has encouraged you to be, but it's just one of those sort of great moments in the fall where I feel like when you look ahead to the upcoming weekend, we got a lot to really look forward to. Now, if you allow me to be self-serving just for a second, I don't do a ton of what I think of sometimes is like the shameless self-promotion, but I do want to make you aware of this. Obviously, many of you know I do high school football on Friday night. And, I'm so excited about our game tonight. Get a chance to be at the newly renovated Bobby Gruen Field City Park in Gainesville. As Gainesville, one of the best teams in the entire state, gets ready to host Milton, the reigning 7A state champs. This is big because, C.J. Wiley was in Athens last week, and he's going to be on our field and on television with us tonight. Ethan Barbour, the Georgia tight end commit. I think that Barbour, we'll talk to Jeff Sentell more about this a little bit later on. I think that Barbour is a guy that I still don't quite think is getting enough attention. He's a better playmaking tight end than perhaps you realize. You'll get a chance to see that with your own eyes on TV tonight. So if you'll allow me to be self-serving in that regard, I'm kind of excited about the game we have tonight and hope you'll all tune in either on the Peachtree Sports Network or perhaps maybe the easiest way for you to find it, our friends at Atlanta News First. That's the old CBS 46. They call themselves Atlanta News First right now. On their website, their app, whatever else, you can stream it really easily, totally free. We'd love to have you tune in and join us tonight. My buddy Rusty Manziel and me doing Milton and Gainesville. That sort of kicks off our football Friday and our football weekend. And then rolling into tomorrow, we hope that Georgia, Mississippi State's somewhat drama-free. We'll obviously have more on that in a moment. We hope that's the case. Assuming that it is, man, can you imagine all the other big games that tomorrow we have a chance to sink our teeth into? I'm really interested in Ohio State and Oregon. I like Dan Lanning. I'd love to see the Ducks pull the upset here. I don't think that's going to happen. I've told you before, I like Ohio State big. We'll talk about that more later on. But that's a game I'm really excited about. You know, Tennessee, Florida, long-time classic rivalry in the SEC, former marquee matchup, not quite that way anymore. But you're kind of wondering, does history continue the way that it has now for about 20 years in this rivalry? We'll talk about that here coming up in a little bit too. But perhaps no game outside of the Georgia game has more interest for Georgia fans, at least I don't think it should, and I think you should be watching this pretty close, than the State Fair in Dallas, there in Texas, as the Longhorns of Texas, Georgia's opponent the following Saturday, gets ready to take on their hated rival, the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, this game has a couple of interesting plot lines to it because of some injury stuff. It was reported yesterday. It seems like it's been confirmed and now official that Quinn Ewers, the Texas quarterback, who's been out now for a couple of weeks, letting Arch Manning kind of have the way there. Well, Ewers is ready to come back. And you would presume this is a preview for what Georgia's going to see next Saturday, because the sense that you get from the folks there in Austin is that while Arch Manning probably has a bright future, and I do think that Manning brings a decent amount to the table, it sounds like they believe that Ewers is their best option at quarterback right now. That's the guy they want starting against Georgia next week. Now, I've said all year long, I still expect one way or another Arch Manning to have some role in the game against Georgia. Red zone package, whatever else. Even if Ewers is healthy and starting, I expect Manning to have a role, but Ewers is now ready to come back. And I think one of the things we'll be watching pretty closely is how healthy does he look in this game on Saturday? Is he really ready to back and take the reins? And is this a Texas team that really is building momentum as it kind of gets into the real portion of its schedule? They have played literally no one as of yet. I'll even count Michigan in that too, because Michigan's essentially a paper tiger. Texas has played no one, but now it starts to get real for them, and is Ewers going to be healthy enough to be the guy to lead them through all of that? On the other side for Oklahoma, they've had a ton of wide receiver injuries that probably depletes what they're able to do offensively for a team that's already had its struggles thus far this season. But you already know my feeling on this. I kind of gave it to you yesterday. My wishful thinking opinion about this game is, wouldn't it be great if Oklahoma could make Texas work for it just a little bit? Make them work hard enough that they've got to show something on film that the Georgia coaches can recognize, that they've got to play kind of a full 60 minutes here. That's been the history of this rivalry, by the way, that when there's been a big spread in this game, it somehow, some way ends up being closer than experts think on either side of it at different times. Texas has been on top or Oklahoma's been on top as the bigger favorite. But when there is a big favorite in this game, and Texas is pretty sizable here, when there's been a big favorite in this game, the underdog has seemingly had a lot of life in this particular spot. Wouldn't that be so great on Saturday if that was also true? Not just from an entertainment perspective, although we would be entertained by it, but also because it would just be perhaps the tiniest advantage for Georgia. After all, a lot of Georgia fans noticed, and you couldn't help but notice, whether it was accidental or deliberate, that Texas seemed to have a pretty favorable schedule when it was all kind of put together for the 2024 season, the debut of the Longhorns here in the SEC, the kinds of landmines that Georgia has, the kinds of landmines that perhaps other SEC teams have. Seemed like Texas didn't have quite as many of those. The path perhaps a little clearer for them. Either, accidentally we just gave Texas a schedule that's easier than anybody else, or perhaps in the eyes of some, the preferential treatment that the Longhorns were used to getting in the Big 12, maybe there was a little bit of a carryover for that to the SEC. Some people are going to say that, whether it's true or not. But the point here is, this is the spot where the Texas schedule, at least potentially, could cause them a little bit of a problem. Could be a little bit of trouble, because they do have to play the big rivalry game prior to playing Georgia. A year ago, Oklahoma wasn't very good then either, and yet they beat Texas straight up in a season in which that was the only regular season game Texas lost. In a year in which they went to the college football playoff, they still lost straight up on the field to the Sooners. Boy, wouldn't it be great if Texas could challenge them tomorrow. But, of course, if that's true, if Texas does go out there and do, or I should say if Oklahoma challenges Texas tomorrow, if they're able to get that done, it's still up to Georgia to sort of do their part to get the full extent of that advantage. Because if Texas is pushed and challenged by Oklahoma, it's only an advantage for UGA if they go out there and make it look easy against Mississippi State. Now, let me talk about my definition of easy here at this particular moment. Georgia's a massive favorite in this game. It's been, 32, 33 points. At one point in time, it may have been even slightly higher than that. And, not everybody cares about point spreads. I totally understand that. But if you think about this as a projection for how the game could play out, that seems a little rich for my blood. Frankly, I'm not even quite sure what the largest margin of victory for an SEC game is thus far this year. But Texas, the team we were just talking about, even they, didn't quite meet expectations when they played Mississippi State, which is undeniably the worst team in the SEC. Texas didn't quite meet expectations against the other Bulldogs the other Saturday. And so at this point in time, maybe Georgia doing the same thing sort of feels like maybe it's not quite time to do that yet. But let me give you an alternate thought here for a moment. Ultimately, whether Georgia wins by 35 points or just 30 points or whatever else may only be of interest to those who actually plan on betting the game. There may, however, be, though, something a little bit more interesting in terms of the actual control that Georgia shows over the game. Because by the time you get to the fourth quarter, when Georgia's presumably up by about 4 touchdowns, whether they extend that to 35 or have that kind of fall in to a lesser margin of victory, some of that's a little bit random. There's some variance that kind of shows up late in the game with a very big spread. But the dominance that Georgia, I think, has a chance to show tomorrow against what should be a very much overmatched opponent. Mississippi State got blown out by Toledo, for instance. This is not a good football team. Got blown out by Florida. Not blown out, but easily beaten by Florida. We know how bad the lousy, stinking Gators are. So what Georgia, I think, could show you, and this is a little bit of last week I said, hey, I'd love to see Georgia score a touchdown in every quarter. Sort of a reasonable expectation for something that is a realistic chance of success. Georgia went out there and did that. So from that regard, you have to say Georgia showed at least some improvement because we hadn't seen that from Georgia kind of prior to that. So in keeping with, hey, what would be realistic and what would be, kind of a step forward for Georgia that's maybe not kind of just sort of blowing doors off the opponent yet, but at least kind of getting better week to week relative to the competition. What I'd love to see is I'd love to see Georgia be up 20 points at the half. I think the halftime line, you can also bet on the point spread going into the half. I think Georgia's around about an 18.5 point favorite for the halftime line. And I think judging where Georgia is through 30 minutes might actually be a little bit more interesting than judging where it is for the full game. Because by the time you get into the second half, you hope, anyway, this one's all but decided, and now you're just sort of playing for the cosmetic points. That's not quite as important as those first 30 minutes when you're kind of earning the right for it to be as easy as it needs to be. And that phrase, the idea of earning the right, that's something that Kirby Smart's talked about here this week. There was a thing going back to Saturday about, getting ready for Auburn in the midst of, Tennessee losing as a favorite to Arkansas, Alabama obviously famously losing as a favorite to Vanderbilt. How you come out there and make sure you handle your business and communicate to your players that, hey, don't look past Auburn and don't be, sulking about losing to Alabama. Be focused on the task at hand. And Smart, in the midst of talking about this, sort of had an interesting way of saying it all, that the kind of free and easy play he wanted to see from his team is the kind of thing they had to earn the right to do over the course of the game and perhaps with the way they prepared coming into the game. So in light of a Saturday tomorrow in which we're sort of hoping that Georgia takes that next step and makes it look easy against an opponent that's supposed to be overmatched, let's go back to last weekend this same time. After the win against Auburn, the mindset that Kirby Smart thinks is important to get that done, whether it's the Auburn opponent or an opponent like Mississippi State on Saturday, this is what Kirby Smart had to say.
I just keep telling them about Auburn, and say that this is a war. This is it's a rivalry game. It's hard. They're a 5-0 team. If they don't turn it over, they're 5-0. How would you feel and prepare for Auburn if they were 5-0? Because that's what they are in my mind. Because I can't promise you turnovers. Those are like random. So, our focus was on them all week. I think our guys wanted to get that taste out of their mouth and go play. That helped. We talked about earning the right to cut it loose. We really had not cut it loose in a game. And I don't know that we did today, but we were closer to it.
So Kirby Smart says, hey, we were closer to cutting it loose against Auburn. And if you're scoring a touchdown every quarter, I'd say, yeah, kind of closer to doing that. Some missed tackles, but for the most part, pretty effective defensively. Seems like they were kind of playing free and easy, or as Kirby Smart described, loose. But wouldn't tomorrow be a great day to cut it loose even more, to turn it loose even more? Wouldn't that be a great day to do that, especially in light of the fact that your opponent next Saturday, Texas, may be challenged in a rivalry game in a way that you shouldn't be challenged as more than a 30-point favorite at home? This is the kind of thing that ought to be somewhat easy to watch. You know, does Georgia look like it's playing smoothly? Does it look like it's having fun? Is Georgia overwhelming Mississippi State from the jump? That's what tomorrow I think is supposed to be. One of these sort of ambush-style performances where Georgia just jumps them coming out of the locker room and stays on them for the first 30 minutes. And at that point in time, if you're up 24-3 at the half or 21-0 at the half or something along those lines, then in the second half, you can get Carson back out of there. Get him some rest if you want to. You can get some young players some more experience. You can tinker with some things if you want to. You can protect your own playbook and kind of hide the stuff that you don't want Texas to see. And maybe you'll be just a little bit more rested when you travel out to Austin next week. In the rough and tumble world of what the SEC is right now, every little advantage matters. And being at your absolute best in the games that matter most, well, obviously anything you can do to get there, of course, is going to be crucial. So somehow, some way, figuring out a way to gain some confidence tomorrow against Mississippi State, keep your players healthy, find the way to get some extra rest, and perhaps do against an overmatched opponent what Texas cannot do against its hated rival Oklahoma. That could be the first step towards a big win in the big game next Saturday. And that's one of the reasons why I think Georgia fans are going to be so locked into everything happening around college football this weekend. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. And we are happy to have you with us, no matter how you get to us, across all platforms, video 10 a.m., everywhere you look on video, radio, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast, wherever you find them there as well, Apple, Spotify, everything else. We're just really glad to have you as a part of our program today. And as you're getting ready for a football Friday or a big football weekend, of course, think about our friends at Kroger when it comes to all of that, all your great game day favorites, the stuff on the grill, the stuff you're putting in the cooler, the plates and napkins for your tailgate, everything else in between. Your local Kroger's got you covered on all of that. So stop in store, shop online, Kroger.com. They are your choice for game day. And don't forget, if you also stop by there as well for your game day stuff, keep in mind that Halloween candy's out there now, right there in the middle of the store. The great decorations and everything else to make Halloween fun. Kroger's got you covered on all that, too. So we're glad to have Kroger as a part of our program here today. We're going to get Jeff Sentell coming up. That's going to be a lot of fun. Prior to that and everything else we're about to do here, including a little bit of, I think, fair critique of Georgia from the pages of DawgNation.com, which we'll give to you in a moment. Let me also, speaking of our big, big game next Saturday for the Dogs in Austin against the Texas Longhorns, let's remind you about DawgNation Invasion. And it is like last-minute, go-time, showtime if you want to be in Austin with us next week. So let me tell you this. Our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips have done a great job securing kind of a group of rooms here. And I believe there may be some inventory left there on that you can kind of find out. If you need that lodging in the Austin area, our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips may still be able to help you out with all of that. But also the big Friday night pregame party, the big tailgate there on that Saturday, which includes your food, your beverage, all the fun there on that, the DawgNation Invasion t-shirt, and everything else that's going to make this such a fun experience. We want you to check out DawgNation.com/tailgate for more on that. It's DawgNation.com/tailgate. Hoping to see you there for our DawgNation Invasion event in Austin next Saturday. Literally hundreds of folks have already signed up for this. You have your chance to do that there as well. So we want to see you, DawgNation.com/tailgate. You can be a part of the big event in Austin. Can't wait to see you there for that. It's going to be a great time. Our friends at Atlanta Sports Trips are making it all possible for you here this year. We hope and look forward to seeing all of you there. DawgNation.com/tailgate for more. All right, so let's do this. Jeff Sentell coming up in a moment. Prior to that, let's go around the Doghouse here today, presented by our friends at Zagoria Law Group. And I told you before that, listen, a little bit of a fair critique, I think, of Georgia. I thought that Connor Riley had an interesting article at DawgNation.com. One of the topics that we've addressed over the course of the last couple of years is the fact that at times we sort of feel like the Georgia offensive line has not gotten the credit it's deserved. For instance, one of the things we've laughed about was the fact that Georgia, no matter how dominant the line was, could never seem to win the Joe Moore Award. They would be a finalist, but somehow Michigan or one of these, teams would end up winning it. And Georgia, we sort of felt like at times was perhaps not getting its credit. We thought always that one of the bedrock foundations of Georgia's 2 national championship teams was a great offensive line, and that Georgia's was certainly deserving of more credit than an award like the Joe Moore Award kind of gave them. Well, here we have a situation this week where, once again, the Joe Moore Award is sort of weighed in here, perhaps, overlooking Georgia. But this time, instead of kind of complaining and saying, hey, why isn't the Joe Moore Award giving Georgia credit? That's the award that goes to the best offensive line in America. Maybe this time you sort of have to acknowledge, you know what? They may be just calling balls and strikes here fairly, acknowledging the fact that this may not, to this point in time, have been a great year for the Georgia offensive line. Connor Riley wrote a story about that at DawgNation.com. I want to read a couple of sentences to you here. In fact, we can put that back on the screen. The words from Connor: the Joe Moore Award has proven to be elusive for Georgia's talented offensive line. Connor goes on to write at DawgNation, despite sending wave after wave of prospects into the NFL and powering Georgia to multiple national championships, Georgia has yet to bring home the award that honors the top offensive line in college football. He says the Bulldogs have recently been routinely been a finalist for the award, but on Tuesday, Georgia didn't even make the 2024 midseason honor roll. 22 teams did, but Georgia's not even, according to the Joe Moore Award right now, one of the top 22 offensive lines in college football. And as Connor writes, it speaks to what has been a difficult season for what has usually been one of Georgia's most stable units. And in this particular case, and we can take that down now, in this particular case, I think Connor's sort of right. When Georgia's not winning the award in 2021 or 2022, we're sort of angry and saying, Joe Moore Award, not giving Georgia enough credit. But in this particular year, if we're being fair, because of some injuries and because of just maybe not quite gelling together yet as a unit, this Georgia offensive line probably has not come into its own and probably has not played its best football as of yet. So if you are looking for something to watch on Saturday against, by the way, Mississippi State's not very good, but their defensive front's pretty big. So overall, like a lot of SEC games, this is probably kind of an interesting test for the Georgia offensive line. Tomorrow would be a great day to see this unit start to kind of click in a way that maybe it hasn't up to this point in time in the season. And much like the offensive line was a major part of Georgia's national championship teams, if Georgia's going to be in the national championship conversation as we move through November into December and into January, you would presume, once again, the Georgia offensive line has to be a very big part of all of that. So tomorrow seems like a great day for all of that to start. Now, the weird thing about offensive line in comparison to some other position groups is it's not always super easy to judge what you're seeing. And it's not always easy to diagnose exactly what the problem is. And I won't pretend to be any smarter at doing that than anybody else is. Some of this kind of stuff is just sort of the assumption that we get based on the overall results. But we are kind of a results-oriented sport here. And certainly as a show, we kind of recognize results as the overall bottom line for, whatever it is you're trying to get done. So last week, we did see Georgia take a little bit of a step forward with its rushing attack. Trevor Etienne, for instance, probably had his best game as a Georgia Bulldog. And somehow, some way, Georgia, which has been kind of at the bottom of the SEC in rushing carries per game, among the worst in overall rushing yards per game, as the Georgia offensive line asserts itself, you sort of think that the rushing yards are likely to go up as kind of a byproduct of that. And that's not the only job. You got to protect Carson Beck too, give him more time to throw. So really, increased offensive performance overall may be a good judgment for how the offensive line is playing. But in particular, if you want to have the best chance to beat Texas 2 weeks from now, having the left-handed and right-handed punch for your offense seems like a pretty important thing there too, which is a pretty pass-happy offense right now. Also needs the extra element of the running game, but you got to dominate people at the point of attack in order for that to be able to happen. And Georgia got to find a way to do that, despite the fact that a guy like Tate Ratledge has been injured and not playing, that this past Saturday Jared Wilson was not playing, although we expect Wilson, I think, to be back maybe on Saturday. you've had to do some of this a little bit more shorthanded than you'd otherwise like to be. But still, the job is the same. Got to find a way to get rushing yards. Once again, after the game last Saturday, Kirby Smart talked about that very point, something else to sort of watch for against Mississippi State tomorrow.
Well, I think we could run it better. And I don't like using excuses. There's probably a lot of teams. I think Auburn's missing one. I don't know what the stat is in the SEC for guys missing offensive line starters, but most teams we played have had maybe one out. We had two out, and we're not like we used to be. Nobody is that I know of has 9, 10 great offensive linemen. So we're thin. And it's going to become a recurring theme, in my opinion, across college football. You're thinner and thinner and thinner. And you got to be smart, maybe in how you practice. But I'm proud of the guys we have, and they're doing a great job. And we are running the ball decent, but we can run the ball better. We can run the ball better than we did today. I know it.
So I love that challenge from Kirby Smart there at the end. He says, and you heard the volume of his voice go up, we can run the ball better. And you got to believe that for Georgia to be as good of a team as it can be, better performance on the ground almost has to be a part of that. So when Kirby Smart issues that challenge, that's something to watch for. Right now, the Joe Moore Award, who's been unfair to Georgia in the past, maybe they're not unfair right now when they say not one of the 22 best offensive lines in America. But clearly for the Dogs to be the best team in America by the end of the season, offensive line performance has got to go up. Sometimes hard to judge, but a great way to evaluate that is, do we start to see more rushing yards? Do we start to see more open holes for backs to go through? And do we start to see Georgia sort of racking it up? That may be something to watch for on Saturday as Georgia tries to turn it loose and get an easy win against the Mississippi State team that, at least based on the point spread, is supposed to be overmatched. And that is Around the Doghouse, presented today by our friends at Zagoria Law. And I love talking about Zagoria Law because I feel like their story's pretty easy to tell. I think in life it's really important to have a thing that you do well that sort of separates you from anybody else. And clearly the Zagoria Law has figured that out because they're the official dog bite injury lawyers, the Georgia Bulldogs, the only law firm in Georgia that sort of specializes in people who've been bitten by dogs and who kind of need the proper compensation for a negligent owner or a situation where you've been hurt because of that dog bite. But in addition to that, I want you to be aware of something. That sometimes there are these situations where you ever in a park or somewhere like that and somebody's dog gets loose and knocks you down, you get knocked over, knocked down, that in itself can create a pretty serious injury. You can break bones, perhaps worse. That's one of the things that can sometimes happen there with that too, that interactions with dogs, especially when the owner of that dog is not maybe taking the proper care to make sure the dog is leashed or under control, that's where our friends at Zagoria Law want to step in. If you've been hurt in a situation like that, if someone you love has been hurt in a situation like that, then I would say that you deserve the compensation that you can get here for this. And obviously our friends at Zagoria Law are going to work very hard to get you what you perhaps have a legal right to. So I want you to reach out and find them. Give them a call, 833-GA-DOG-BITE, 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's dog spelled the conventional way, D-O-G. Also online, ZagoriaLaw.com. That's spelled Z-A-G-O-R-I-A, ZagoriaLaw.com. Listen, we all love dogs here, but we don't love it when a dog's not properly cared for, not properly leashed or constrained, and all of a sudden that dog bites you, knocks you over, knocks your kids over, something like that. You hear these harrowing stories in the news all the time, and that is what Zagoria Law and the great attorneys there have dedicated their professional lives to serving folks around. So make sure you check that. They literally wrote the book on how to win these type of cases. It's great to have Zagoria Law bringing Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, before we're done, another look at the other big games around college football and a great opportunity to get fired up for the big one on Saturday based on something that Kirby Smart has said this week that kind of got some attention because it was a little bit different than maybe what you would have expected him to say. We'll do all that here coming up in a little bit. But as we told you yesterday, in addition to the action on the field for Georgia, this is also arguably one of the biggest days of them all for the 2025 recruiting class. What do we need to know about Elijah Griffin and Chase Linton and names such as that before they take their official visit to UGA? We'll find out about it all right now with Jeff Sentell here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Jeff Sentell joins us here right now. Massive day in line for the Dogs tomorrow, hosting major recruits, including maybe A surprise official visitor going on top of everything else with the names we already know. We'll see if we can unpack all of that. Jeff Sentell here today. Jeff, I laid it out yesterday. I believe that tomorrow is arguably among the most important days on the 2025 recruiting calendar for UGA. We'll get to Chase Linton. Let me focus on Elijah Griffin here for a moment. The chance to impress him on his birthday, as you talked about on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger this week. Family in tow for that, as official visits typically include. What a chance to make a big impression on a major, major target. How do you expect all of this to go down?
Brandon, I think Georgia's going to do what Georgia does. Much like people say Saturday nights in Athens are undefeated, I guess you would say official visits in Athens for 5 stars are undefeated, man. You've got Elijah Griffin celebrating his birthday weekend, bringing all of his inner circle, his friends and family into Georgia, into Athens for a great weekend. You would call it a potential feast of an opponent. Number 1 player in the state, Brandon. Number 1 defensive tackle prospect in the country. He is obviously probably number 1 on anyone's guest list this weekend. And it's also a birthday weekend. And Brandon, there are whispers that Elijah, unlike his peer 5-star in the state, he doesn't want to run the marathon. His sprint, his journey might be over. He might be very close to making his decision, maybe even on his birthday weekend, my friend. Brandon, again, I can't stress this enough. Georgia offered him and really basically reset his whole horizon of his future when he was in the 8th grade. They offered him, it's a special day. He'll never forget that day for a lot of reasons, both football career-wise and personal family-wise. And this is kind of a full circle weekend for the Dogs and Elijah Griffin as Georgia seeks to add the number 1 defensive tackle in the country to this class. And Brandon, I don't need to have many billboards in your show proclaiming how much defensive linemen matter to Georgia, not just in any class, but this class and next year's team.
No, you're absolutely right. You made the comparison to Justice Terry a moment ago. We always seem to mention Griffin and Terry in the same sentence because of, obviously, the sort of twin pillars of importance they are for this Georgia class. In the case of Terry, if it's not Georgia, I think most of us assume it would be Alabama, the most challenging potential suitor for his services. In the case of Griffin, is it Miami? Who is Georgia battling for Griffin right now?
To be honest, Brennan, I think Georgia might be battling a few more weeks and months on the calendar. That's probably the biggest obstacle. It's USC and it's Miami. Those are his kind of formal and proper final 3. But Brennan, I don't even know if he's going to make it to Miami anytime soon. You've also got Elijah's, everybody, it's kind of funny. There's a little side note here, Brandon, that it seems like 30 people from the Southeast are visiting USC this weekend, except for Elijah Griffin, where he's taking his official visit to Athens.
Yeah, I tell you, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'm just going to give this my own opinion. One of the most telling things for me, as someone who observes the recruiting process, when you don't know who the silver medalist is, that's usually a pretty strong indicator of what the final result is going to be. We've seen this happen before when there wasn't an obvious contender, to swoop in and steal, that if you want to jump to the last page and know what the final outcome is going to be, that can be a pretty significant tell on that.
Yeah, Brandon. I mean, for me, we introduced on our Before the Hedges program on Wednesdays, we introduced something called the Dogometer or the Dogometer, depending whether you're North Georgia or South Georgia or North Florida, South Florida, I guess. And I would put Elijah Griffin's readings, maybe even beyond that, a finely crafted Cody Chafin's graphic. Maybe if there's a level past, maybe between past the Bulldog and maybe towards Brock Bowers, maybe towards the Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker, Jalen Carter type category, I think that's Elijah. Now, one thing I will say, and I'm not trying to be a contrarian because this is a fun show, this is a happy show. Elijah Griffin is very, very good, but he's very, very good. He's probably one of the 2 easy best defensive tackle prospects in the country. But I will preach a little bit of caution about Elijah. To me, high school film-wise, call it maybe Jeff keeping it real. he's not yet in that Jalen Carter type lane. And that is no disrespect to Mr. Griffin down in Savannah Christian at all. It's just what the film shows me right now.
On another of the official visitors expected tomorrow is Chase Linton, and I'll be completely candid here for a moment. I don't know a ton about Linton. We were supposed to have him on TV earlier this year. He was not able to play that game. I was really looking forward to seeing him. North Atlanta has obviously become a very good program, but it's not like one of those programs that, if you follow Georgia high school football, you haven't been following like North Atlanta for a million years, although credit to them and Jamie All, their coach, they've become very good as of late. But the point is that Georgia has seemingly been very interested in Linton for quite some time at the expense of other edge rusher types that it could have gone after. Linton's just sort of been their guy, and other guys that we thought might be candidates here really kind of weren't because Georgia seemed pretty locked on who it was pursuing. So obviously I start with Elijah Griffin. That's a name I've been pretty fixated on for a while. But give me a little bit of a thumbnail on the official visit for Chase Linton, the edge rusher out of North Atlanta tomorrow.
Yeah, this is kind of a wake-up call probably on your show. I want folks to know about Chase. Number one, he is very much to me an old soul. He's very smart. He's very well respected. Brendan, he was committed to Rutgers at a time when Georgia really started heating him up over the summer. And, he's really fast. He would be the third edge type prospect in the class with obviously the 5-star Isaiah Gibson, obviously a top 100 recruit in Darren Akinabong. But you've also got Chase, who I think is very aptly named, man. He's got a pick 6 this year where he kind of tipped the ball down and he caught it. He's very active. He wants to be very mobile, very physical, always moving. You see those highlights right here. He's actually moving on kind of a bum ankle right there, but he's still practicing in what still is a pretty spirited Wednesday, Thursday type day before a game walkthrough. Chase really impresses me, man, for a lot of reasons why I think, Georgia likes to find guys like this. And I think Chase is one of those guys. I love the story about him. I tell it every time, Brandon. He and I go back and forth. He loves Batman. He loves superheroes. He's a very much a kid that's comfortable in his own skin. So much so, Brandon, that I asked him once, what does he listen to pregame? And he listens to the new edition Essentials Classic, Can You Stand the Rain? I don't know if you're familiar with that song, Brandon, but that was an oldie, I guess a semi-oldie, but a goodie back in the day in the Wayback Machine. But anytime there's an edge rusher that listens to that type of music, that's the right type of OG, old school, plus a little bit of guy that maybe wants to bring the pain, not just the rain, on Friday nights for 4 quarters.
I love to hear that. Shifting gears here, I'll be totally candid for a moment. Sometimes I'm kind of hard on myself. I like to try to do a good job. If I feel like I don't do a good job, I'm disappointed, to be totally honest. And last Saturday when I had you on our DawgNation postgame show, I was really mad at myself after that because there's so much going on. There was, obviously some craziness with Alabama getting beaten, trying to figure out what's happening with Georgia, excitement because C.J. Wiley, more on him in a moment, at the game. And I totally whiffed on asking you about Ousmane Kromah and his commitment to Georgia, which happened before the game that day. This had been kind of announced and expected that he was going to announce. Most people kind of thought Georgia was in a pretty good spot on this by the end. Nonetheless, Kromah is a very productive player, a guy that I like. I always like it when guys kind of earn their right to be in this class. I believe that's what Kromah has done here. So let me do now what I should have done with you when I spoke to you last Saturday, asking about Ousmane Kromah. By the way, this is also a reminder why you shouldn't commit on. Well, let me not say that because I hope that Georgia gets commitment tomorrow. But
well played.
Nonetheless, tell me what Georgia's getting here in Kromah. I know you and Kaylee had a great celebration on Before the Edge was presented by Kroger on Wednesday. I thought that was actually really funny. I enjoyed that. People should check that on the DawgNation YouTube page if they missed it. But bottom line, what is Georgia getting from the outstanding running back from Leesburg?
Brandon, you know how everybody felt kind of the pain last year or a couple years ago when Justice Haynes chose Alabama, and that was kind of like, besides the legacy part, what you had a prolific homegrown Peach State running back, piled up the yards. Brandon, Ousmane Kromah has been, this, we've been calling his games for forever. You've been broadcasting his games. I've been covering his games. I remember, Brandon, we were in Warner Robins, I believe, his freshman year, and he was already like over the 1,000-yard mark, averaging like 12 yards per carry. He was already kind of a dude back then, Brandon, and he's over 5,600 career rushing yards. Now he's catching about 600 yards worth of passes a game. Number 5 running back in the country, chose Georgia. And really, the autopsy, the DNA, the backstory on this, Brandon, is Georgia beat Auburn on October the 5th, I believe, by 31-13. That's what the pages of history will say. But Georgia also beat Auburn on September the 7th for Ousmane Kromah. That's when a lot of the crystal balls were still pointing towards him choosing Auburn. And he took a visit for the Tennessee Tech game. So every time we talk about recruits and the big game splendor's not there, or there's not a monumentally mammoth opponent on Saturday, don't sleep on these games. Don't sleep on a Mississippi State. Don't sleep on a Tennessee Tech, because that's when Ousmane Kromah got a chance to see behind the scenes, behind the VIP ropes. He got to go VIP, see everything he needed to know about Georgia, got to mesh with the players, got to talk to the coaches, felt the love. And that's what I will regard as the time when Georgia beat out Auburn for Ousmane Kromah. I think he still went back and saw Florida State after that Georgia visit. I think he still went back and, shook hands with Hugh Freeze again. But from that point to me, all my signs pointed to he was a dog from that point, and he announced it last weekend on the Auburn game.
Yeah, fun Saturday last weekend for UGA recruiting. Expectations, the same thing's going to be true this weekend there as well. In fact, let me backtrack on this point just for a moment. We talked about Linton a moment ago. We talked about Elijah Griffin a moment ago. What else is perhaps in store? Maybe even some surprises. We had some surprises last week. What else is perhaps in store tomorrow from a recruiting standpoint?
Yeah, you're watching, I don't know if it's a surprise anymore, but an Alabama running back commitment. Anthony Turbo Rogers. Brandon, I know you want to go Mr. Burns here on me and everything with I trade everything I have for a little bit more, but how do you feel about taking a guy away from Montgomery, Alabama, initially South Alabama, kind of Pike County, Alabama, an Alabama running back commitment by the name of Anthony Turbo Rogers? He's told folks he's going to take his official visit to Georgia. And Brandon, I don't know how you feel about it, but 3 running backs in the class, I think that would be a kind of the culture of the new 105, kind of a culture of Kirby Smart going into games against maybe Kentucky and Clemson and seeing he only had really 2 or 3 viable scholarship tailbacks available and up to play when the number, even the Del McGee number, used to be 5. Well, Brandon, Georgia could take 2 back-to-back cycles where Georgia stacks up 6 running backs in the program just in the 2024 and 2025 classes. And listen, I don't expect Branson Robinson to go anywhere. Roderick Robinson still he's been injured, but you wonder about, Trevor Etienne. He will likely, if he keeps putting up numbers like he did last week against Auburn, he's likely a one and done guy at Georgia. So you don't really see where Georgia needs a lot of those running backs, but maybe the new era of Georgia means they might take 3 in back-to-back years. That would be unprecedented.
Well, here's the other thing, too. You're talking about Turbo Rogers. Georgia's already got a nitro toggle. I'm surprised this thought hasn't occurred to you. With a nitro and a turbo on the same team, Georgia's like becoming the American Gladiators. If you want to take it back to the 90s, the great syndicated weekend afternoon show that used to always air. A turbo and a nitro, Georgia's essentially the American Gladiators at that point.
You need somebody, what was that big pugil stick, I guess, Brandon, you remember that? And they had to climb up that wall. Maybe that wall opponents, if we want to keep it really American Gladiators, maybe that wall might be Justice Terry, Elijah Griffin, and the other stalwarts in the 2025 recruiting class.
Hey, I'm in favor of all of that. I got more questions for you, Jeff. Let me also give a quick shout out to our friends at Beaver Toyota, though. We love having them a part of DawgNation Daily because we love all the stuff they're doing, taking care of folks in our audience all the time. And frankly, it's one of those day and ages where people want everything to be more convenient, everything to be a little easier, and Beaver Toyota's really been made famous for how easy they've made the vehicle buying experience. They're giving you the chance to shop from the comfort of your own home. It's fun, it's definitely fast, and it's convenient because if you're like me, you've got very little in the way of time, but you also want a nice new vehicle, and our friends at Beaver Toyota give you the chance to have that. So make sure you check them out online. It's beavertoyotacoming.com. beavertoyotacoming.com. Not only can you shop online, they'll deliver the vehicle straight to you. You never even have to leave your house. You can just, much like you're getting one of these food deliveries or something like that, you can just look out there in the driveway and see a brand new, beautiful Toyota vehicle. Our friends at Beaver Toyota Coming got you on all of that, so find them online. It's beavertoyotacoming.com. beavertoyotacoming.com. All right, Jeff, if the time we have left, if you allow me to be self-serving here just for a moment, I'm thrilled about what I get a chance to televise tonight. Our buddy Rusty Manziel and me on the Peachtree Sports Network, Milton and Gainesville. Bobby Gruen Field there. City Park in Gainesville has been recently renovated. That's a loaded football team. They're going to be loaded for bear tonight in their home venue. Milton obviously comes in with all kinds of accolades. And for the purposes of our show, it's kind of a couple of names here that I wanted to address with you just for a moment. Starting with C.J. Wiley. You know, Wiley was there last weekend. I get, and you had a very interesting interview with him on Before the Hedge, presented by Kroger here this week. You know, he's in a very tough spot right now. It's almost like you don't really know what to say because there are certainly things that Georgia fans want to hear, and that Milton community is surrounded by Georgia fans that would love to have Wiley come to UGA, just being completely honest with you. Obviously, you've got the Florida State people that are trying to get him to sort of stick with the commitment that he made, and he's just a high school guy trying to go through his senior year. It's weird to say I feel sorry for a guy like this who's a great athlete, but you almost sort of feel sorry for the position that he's in, the sort of pull on his time and the sort of demand for information. But at the same time, I've been saying it for months, that this was game on the moment Wiley visited Georgia again. Well, Wiley visited Georgia again this past weekend. As far as I'm concerned, for one of the most talented receivers in the country, certainly among the most talented here in the state, I got to feel like this is a fight to the end now. Maybe Georgia doesn't win it. You know, maybe Wiley maintains the Florida State commitment or is kind of family pull to LSU. Maybe that becomes a factor. But I feel like this is a brand new ball game now that Wiley's feet touched soil in Athens last weekend.
Yeah, Brandon. Hey, man, first of all, I got to give you kudos. You know, what is that Kirby Smart and Eli Drinkowich have said? You know, you got to win your clunkers. Well, man, I know sometimes you never admit it, but maybe you didn't have that Beaver Toyota type matchup that you guys do this weekend on Friday night with unbeaten, nationally ranked, top 5 kind of consensus, nationally ranked, unbeaten Milton team versus Gainesville and Josh Niblett and what he calls the kingdom and what they're trying to do there. D1 Power 5 SEC prospects on both sides. And I know your eyes will be focused on Wiley, Brennan. And I'm just going to talk to you like me, you and I are in the back of a car traveling to Austin, Texas or Lexington, Kentucky. I would definitely, it's a visit. It moves things with Georgia, Brandon. But, you know, CJ's not very open. He's very reserved. He's kind of quiet anyway. Like you see him when he does the tomahawk chop here, when he chooses Florida State, like that's about as emotional as he's going to get. And he's told me, Brandon, he told me this week, man, he's like, he don't care what anybody thinks.
Yeah.
He doesn't care what anybody thinks, whether it's peers, whether it's the bubble around Milton High and everybody telling him to be a dog. Brandon, I even feel it's not even what mom and dad say because he's going to do his own thing. It's not even what his good buddy Ethan Barbour there is going to tell him. He's going to make this decision on his own. He's going to be kind of like in an isolation chamber. It's going to be what he wants and what he feels is the best. And I would just call it a visit, Brandon. I would call it a brick in the road, on the red and black road, on the chance for him to become a dog. But I think there's a lot of more bricks that's got to be laid. He has no more visits planned. He doesn't have anything pending where he's going to get back to Georgia for the Tennessee game. He's just kind of going to do this his own way. And Brandon, I've already seen enough of CJ. I've been talking to him maybe 10 times over the last 2 years. He's going to do things his own way. And I can't apply the depth of my experience and what I've seen before to this specific recruitment. I think it's going to be an outlier. I think it's going to be an anomaly. He told me kind of point blank that he knows why Florida State's struggling because they lost all those players to the NFL. And yet I'm sure he probably privately feels like or knows, or somebody like James Coley has told him that Georgia loses that type of a shipment of players to the NFL every year. It's called the NFL draft. That's kind of the new norm in Athens. So it's a lot of wait and see on CJ. I mean, he would help Georgia, as I said on our program, on our Before the Hedges show brought to you by Kroger, that he looks like a number 1 wide receiver in the SEC, and Georgia, for being honest, doesn't have a lot of those body types that the NFL guys would look at and say, yeah, that's what a first-round receiver looks like. Let me give you one little quick shot of good news, Brandon. I saw Ethan Barbour at practice this week. That's the Georgia tight end commitment. I want you to wait for him tonight to surprise you, Brandon. He looks like he's lost a little bit of weight. He's actually the X receiver now at Milton. CJ's playing a lot of the Z, doing a lot of slot stuff, moving around. Barbour has lost some weight. He's ran a lot of routes, Brandon. He looks maybe a step and a half faster than I've seen him ever in his high school career, Brandon. And I love this, what a coach told me about Barbour this week. It's like, I know you're a family show, so I'll clean it up a little bit. He said, whatever you need him to be, whatever matchup you need him to win, he is the butt kicker for that football team, and he will kick the butt of the other guy lined up across from him.
It's funny. I had a coach tell me a very similar thing, so it's kind of funny that reputation is out there for him right now. And I was going to finish by mentioning Barbour because, look, I feel like Elias Williams is still underrated, and yet Williams gets a lot more attention than Barbour does. I really, and this is going to come across like I'm, trying to hype my own game, and I guess to a certain extent I am. I really think that Georgia fans should watch Barbour tonight because I'm telling you right now, obviously, a good blocker too, as we were just referencing. He's willing to do the dirty work. Jeff, he is a far more accomplished playmaker than I think a lot of Georgia fans realize. And for all the attention a Williams is getting or previous tight ends that Georgia has brought in recent years, all with good reason, it's kind of funny that Barbour has always been somewhat quiet in terms of the chatter he generates among fans. But he was a playmaker at Alpharetta before he came to Milton, and now playing with a quarterback in Luke Nickel that I think the Georgia fans ought to be watching pretty closely too, just because of how much his stock is rising in state here right now. I think that Barbour, as you said, playing wide receiver, the fact that he's a tight end who can play the wide receiver position, but also can attach himself in line and become a blocker. Jeff, I really do think that Barbour is a far more interesting prospect than the sort of average fan who maybe only has a casual relationship with recruiting, perhaps that fan even realizes.
Brendan, I'm going to use one of your favorite words, catchphrases. I'm going to say, this is my honesty compels me to admit portion of our segment here right now. I think we need to normalize the fact that Georgia, when looking at its receivers and pass catchers, I think people just need to lump the tight ends and wide receivers together because that's what Georgia is bringing in. And, hey, this is not all tight end you here because I think Talon Taylor, he stands to be the highest rated Georgia wide receiver since the 2020 class. That's the guy already committed who's still significantly higher rated than CJ Wiley that everybody's taking a look at real hard right now. But you put in Barbour, Brandon, you put in Elias Williams. Those are going to be some of the top offensive weapons in this class. And everybody's going to wonder, hey, what's going on at wide receiver? Where's the 5 stars? Where's the top 100 guys? That's what I do. That's what we're supposed to do. But you got to look at Barbour and you got to look at Elias Williams, who's having a great season where he's basically tripling his career numbers or his best single season numbers at Camden County now that they're throwing the ball around and they're out of the wing tee. I know we make it sound like Georgia's offense is thirsty for weapons, but when you start looking at the tight end position and how difficult those matchups will be, and then the wide receiver continued recruiting, I think Georgia's playmaker portion of this class is still in a very good spot.
Jeff, I don't know if you heard, but it's a Football Friday for us here today, so we appreciate your thoughts on a big weekend for high school football, major recruits into building tomorrow. Thanks for being here, and we'll look forward to talking to you as a part of our Dog Nation post-game show. And hopeful to goodness, if somebody commits tomorrow, I won't forget to ask you about it on the show tomorrow. But nonetheless, thanks for being here as a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and we'll see you for our Dog Nation post-game show after the game tomorrow from the UGA bookstore.
Brandon, if somebody does, maybe we'll get Kaylee to give you some squawkers and some party hats for your post-game show. And, hey, one thing, guys, there's a 2026 wide receiver. Now, I'm speaking Brandon's language. He loves electric wide receivers. Vance Spafford. He's out of Mission Viejo, California. He's got a 5-star on his high school team going to Alabama. That dude probably only covers him 1 time out of 10. He's got like 32 touchdowns so far his last sophomore, junior year. He's coming to Athens this weekend on an official visit. Brandon, very quietly, this playmaker with 4.3, low 4.4 speed, very quietly has Georgia among his very top schools. I think if this goes well for Georgia, it could put Georgia in pole position to eventually win that recruitment for another standout playmaker from California.
All right, Jeff, appreciate that. Great stuff. We'll look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger here today.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC 3.
Yeah, man, a lot going on. It's a lot of fun, and we'll see you tonight on Peachtree Sports Network and streaming with our friends at Atlanta News First. Milton and Gainesville, one of the best games we'll get a chance to do, and obviously a precursor to might be a big day for UGA recruiting tomorrow, if you catch my drift. Jeff Sentell helping preview that right there. How about cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean? You know, Jeff and I just kind of riffing and sort of, talking some recruiting stuff. You know, we do that on our DawgNation cruise. When you join us in April, you can go up to Jeff and ask him any question you want to, and he's forced to answer. That's kind of the, if you look at the terms and conditions of the Royal Caribbean cruise contract agreement that you have to sign, that's what it says. Hey, all secrets must be told. That's actually in the fine print. People don't realize that, but it is true. Of course, I kid, but the point is we have a great time. Just these conversations as we get to know folks and hang out and enjoy all of that. And we'd love to see you as a part of our next DawgNation cruise there as well. We'd love for you to be a part of the great things going on with Royal Caribbean. By the way, this is not for me to tell you now, but I heard they're opening up another Perfect Day. You got Perfect Day Coco Cay. They're opening a Perfect Day destination on the Pacific side. And I believe now Royal Caribbean has announced, when I get the green light to tell this, I think they're going to do another Perfect Day there as well. To me, that's what everybody wants, right? They love the private destinations. They love Perfect Day Coco Cay. They're doing the brand new Royal Beach Club there at Paradise Island, the Bahamas, where like that almost becomes now a private destination. It's just the best stuff, man. It's just so good. Royal Caribbean is so aggressive right now. New ships, new private destinations, just new, fun. And you got to get involved with this right now because it is a hot ticket at the moment. Jessica Slater is a great travel agent. She can tell you all about it. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Here's what I can tell you. April of 2025, our DawgNation cruise going to Perfect Day Coco Cay on the, at least for now, newest of the Royal Caribbean cruise ships, Utopia of the Seas. That means you want the Aqua Theater with the high diving show. You want all the fun of all of the neighborhoods, some of my favorite specialty restaurants like the Mason Jar, or great bars like the View Bar on the top of the pool deck and the Lime and Coconut. All of that for you on board Utopia of the Seas. Jessica Slater can tell you all about that. All right, let's get ready to go cruising around the SEC. Give you a few final thoughts on some of the biggest games of the weekend. So as I kind of hinted at to begin the show and told you a moment ago, Ohio State, Oregon is a great football game, one of the biggest we've seen thus far this year. The only game of note Ohio State's played since the season began. I love Dan Lanning. I think that Lanning's an up-and-coming coach. I think that Lanning will have a lot of great moments. But to be fair, in his career as of yet, he really doesn't have a big win yet. Winless against Kalen DeBoer, for instance, just kind of missing those moments that could have really announced his arrival. And based on the way that Oregon has played thus far this season, I don't expect it to come Saturday either. I think that Saturday is a big day for the Buckeyes. Told you yesterday, by the time the day is done, I believe that Jeremiah Smith will have entered his name into the Heisman Trophy conversation. I think he's that good. I think he's the easiest chance for Ohio State to score. I don't think that Oregon's got anybody that can stop him. I think tomorrow's a big day for Smith. And at that point in time, the Buckeyes, after being the most talked about team in the offseason, will really for the first time in 2024 be talked about for something they do on the season. In the season, that's what I expect to happen. Also, we talked about Texas and Oklahoma off the top of the show here today. It's kind of interesting that you've got two rivalry games with very similar themes in terms of, hey, will long-standing narratives prevail? For instance, in the Texas-Oklahoma game, we've seen examples for a long time where the underdog just sort of plays well in the spot. One of the most overrated things in college football is, hey, throw the records out the window when rivals get together. For the most part, we would say that's not true. For the Georgia rivalries, for the most part, that is especially not true. Better team has a tendency to win. But for whatever reason, Texas-Oklahoma, this is sort of a throw the records out the window type of rivalry here, where our buddy, the Chris Felica, the Bear from Fox, had this, that when you look at moments in which this game had an in excess of a 2-touchdown spread like it does on Saturday, that has been sort of an automatic blind bet on the underdog in the past. I don't quite know that it's that easy on Saturday, but I do think Oklahoma could stand up here. The fact of the matter, in the Sarkisian era, Oklahoma's won 2 of these 3 games, covered 2 of these 3 games in the Sarkisian era. Despite the fact they've lost 13 games over that span, they have had it figured out against Texas. Chasm of difference talent-wise here right now. But I sort of suspect maybe the same thing could be true, and this could at least be a football game going into the fourth quarter. I sort of expect that to be the case. Similarly, another game, Florida and Tennessee. And this is one of those deals where friends can sort of be honest with each other. Obviously, I hate Florida, as you know, sort of made a cottage industry out of hating, as I like to call them, the lousy, stinking Gators, and I don't like Tennessee either, just as much as all of y'all do. But if you're around my same age, can we be honest about this for a moment? You know, I'm 40, whatever. If you're around my same age, child of the 90s, that was the game, right? Third Saturday in September. It used to be back when CBS had the U.S. Open tennis tournament contract, that they would run tennis for the first few weeks in September, and their first game of the year was always Florida-Tennessee. Do y'all remember back when that was true? And I hate Florida, I hate Tennessee, but I did love this game. There was just a lot of energy around the game, a lot of juice to it. And honestly, almost since then, at least the last 20 years, almost since then, Florida's just sort of had their way with Tennessee. Even last year, they beat them straight up. A Billy Napier team that finished with a losing record beat Tennessee. Did you remember that? 2022, a Tennessee team that would go to number 1 in the polls, famously before Georgia dragged them. They barely beat Florida that year, won the game by 5 points inside the expected margin of victory. That for whatever reason, Florida has just sort of had Tennessee's number. Coming off a loss, could that really be true once again? I don't know, man. I don't know. Tennessee, I stand by everything I said about them. I think that what they showed you for the first few weeks was legitimate. This is one of the better teams in the SEC, kind of upper third-ish team in the SEC. They're not great offensively right now. They're really not. Nico Iamaleava, fine prospect, bright future maybe. He's not among the best quarterbacks, even in the SEC right now, certainly not among the best in the country. I'm not telling you that Florida's going to win this game, but it seems like things have sort of stabilized for Florida a little bit. They did beat UCF last week, maybe called into question somewhat given the fact the week before UCF got blown out by Colorado. I think maybe this is just nostalgia coming up in me. I think there's a chance that Florida-Tennessee is worth watching again tomorrow. I really do. I really do. Magnolia Bowls tomorrow, LSU and Ole Miss. What I've said about Ole Miss is they're in kind of a weird scheduling spot because they're playing back-to-back road games. They passed that test with flying colors at Williams-Brice Stadium last week. But the kind of team that goes and wins easily at South Carolina, then 7 days later goes into Death Valley and beats LSU, the kind of team that does that is the sort of best team among the best teams in America that do that type of thing. I don't believe that's what Ole Miss is. Now, they're also not as bad maybe as the team that lost to Kentucky. They're probably better than that. Maybe got caught on a bad day. But back-to-back road games, hostile environments, win the one game easily and then just win the other, especially by the expected margin they're talking about in excess of a field goal right now. It sort of feels like that's a little rich for what Ole Miss is probably capable of right now. LSU has been pound for pound among the most disappointing teams in the country, but getting points at home, night game, Death Valley, feels like we've sort of been there before, and that's a pretty dangerous spot for the visitor. Maybe that's true for the Rebels there as well. I'll also say this really quick. This is the most interested I've probably ever been in a Vanderbilt-Kentucky game. You know, Kentucky's still a big favorite over Vanderbilt, despite the fact that Vanderbilt beat Alabama last week. But I was reminded this week, do y'all remember that Vandy, the team that beat Alabama, on the road against what was then a top 10 ranked Missouri team, they almost won that game. And we didn't think much about it at the time because we're like, well, maybe Missouri's not very good. We see upsets sometimes, you know, wasn't that big of a deal. But when you pair almost winning on the road against a top 10 team with beating Alabama at home, I know they lost to Georgia State, but go back and watch that game. That was like a miracle play sort of late to give Georgia State the victory, which I realize it's an SEC team losing to Georgia State. Let's not make it more than it is. Or as Paul Feinbaum said on TV the other day, Georgia Southern, I told you, that guy knows whatever's written down on a sheet of paper in front of him and nothing else. The point is, you know, losing to Georgia State, still a close game, kind of a miraculous play at the end to win it for State. Like, there's a chance that Vanderbilt, to a certain degree, is kind of the real deal. I expect this game to be close. I don't know if they'll win, but I expect them to go on the road and compete because that's what they've been doing all year long. I am definitely on the Diego Pavia bandwagon as the Vanderbilt quarterback. I really like his moxie. I love the hunger a guy like that has. A guy who was given nothing, kind of came from nothing. He was at New Mexico State. Anybody could have him, and he's just fighting like mad. There is not 1 ounce of sort of like bonus baby, like whatever with him, man. He is just a fighter. Now, for my taste, probably curses a little too much in the post-game interview, but man, he is a fighter, and I love every second of that. So a lot of fun games to watch here this upcoming weekend. We'll make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. But no matter how fun the action is outside of Athens on Saturday, the thing we care about the most is what's going to happen between the hedges. And Kirby Smart is challenging. He wants you to be there. He wants you to be loud. He wants you to be ready to go. And, of course, a great tailgate's a great lead-in for all of that. And tomorrow with very, very pleasant weather, very, very nice. Let me just tell you, it's a great time to have the Finish long drink out as a part of your tailgate. We'll tell you how you can do that here coming up. But it's also a great reminder that Georgia has a chance tomorrow to take a huge step towards being absolutely ready for Texas and all the other big games that are on the rest of the way here for the Dogs in the 2024 season. Exactly how do they do that? Exactly how do they find the proper motivation for that? Well, Kirby Smart's challenged the fans to be part of that story, but he also had a very interesting description for how he's challenging the team itself in relationship to all that this week. And our Cody Chafin's had some fun with that as a part of his latest hype video. Let's check that out right now as a part of our long finish presented by the Finish Long Drink.
We're doing a Netflix documentary on you this week. Who would you want to watch it? And would they like approve? Would you send it to your parents? Would you send it to an NFL team if they did a Netflix documentary on your performance and your pride and how you practice this week?
I am so ready to be between the hedges tomorrow, so ready to see the fan response to this challenge from Kirby Smart, and so ready to see Georgia take that next big step. We've asked, could you be up 20 points in the first half? Could you coast into halftime with the game already fully in control and with zero doubt about the eventual outcome? That'd be a great thing to see. Cody Chafin's hype video certainly sets the stage for that to perhaps happen. It's a part of our long finish, presented by the Finish Long Drink. I'm also ready to see Dog fans enjoying themselves with a great tailgate. And there is nothing that goes better with your tailgate than the Finish Long Drink. We enjoyed some the other day there at the Iron Horse Golf Club. Man, that was so much fun. Our buddy Bill, who won the contest, we were there with him, enjoying some Finish Long Drink. The peach-flavored version was out and about. The Long Drink Zero, no carbs, no sugar. You know my favorite's the blue can. That's the grapefruit flavor, the gin kick. Long Drink Strong. I know some of y'all love that. 8.5% alcohol by volume. A lot of y'all going to be enjoying that tomorrow prior to the game. Whatever your favorite is, this is a great time of year to be enjoying the Finish Long Drink. So check it out. It comes from Finland. It's a ready-to-drink cocktail in a can, so it looks like a beer, but it's not. If you like mixed drinks, it's just a mixed drink that you can drink straight out of the can or pour into the glass, whatever you want to do there. It's the Finish Long Drink. Make sure you check some out today. It's like the most I was at a golf course the other day. Like, we sell more Finish Long Drink than anybody. You know, like the long drink and golf just go great together, but the Finish Long Drink and a college football tailgate, that goes great together as well. So find out more online. It's thelongdrink.com. All right, a handful of golden shoes to give you on our way out the door here today. Let's start with this. Got a great email this week. Sometimes we get golden shoe submissions via email. I'm always thankful for that. Curtis Shireman sending this to me. He sent kind of a funny video he had made of the lousy, stinking Gators, which I love. But he also sent this great picture of his son. They drove down from Pennsylvania to come to the game. hanging out with the Spike Squad there. He's got his spikes on. By the way, a shout out to Atlanta Falcons quarterback Kirk Cousins, who also did some of that this week at the University of Georgia, too. But good stuff there from Curtis. You always love to see when a dad and a son are having a good time going to a game like that. That was a fun thing to be able to see. Really, really terrific stuff. So Curtis will give you and your son and the Spike Squad there as well a golden shoe for all of that. How about another golden shoe going to Manatee Jetpack, who sent this photo? It's been kind of shown by some people here this week. An Auburn offensive lineman just absolutely wrapping his arms around a Georgia defender last week. Find you somebody who will hold you like that, and you'll be very happy in life. But in this particular case, I'm not quite so sure that's supposed to be allowed by the officials. And that's why Manatee Jetpack writes in to say, DawgNation Daily, what's the official doing here on this one? Which is a great question. One of those potential holdings that somehow conveniently overlooked. Seems like we have some of that around the Georgia games from time to time. So we'll give Manatee Jetpack a golden shoe for that there as well. And then finally, another golden shoe coming the way of Sam Stevens. We talked about Vanderbilt before. Sam having some fun with this, saying, boy, Texas' next three opponents get exponentially tougher. It's Oklahoma this week, it's Georgia next week, and then it's Texas against Vanderbilt after that, which you better be careful playing these Commodores here right now. Very funny from Sam Stevens. We'll give him a golden shoe for that there as well. Lousy, stinking Gators, we will give them nothing except a beating. And that comes here in just a few weeks. Already starting to hear some rumblings and grumblings about people making their cocktail party plans, which means it's a great time of year. 1,434 days. That's how long it's been since the Georgia Bulldogs have lost to those lousy, stinking Gators. We don't expect that to change anytime soon. Thanks for being here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Thanks for being a part of our Gator Hater Updater. Enjoy the game tomorrow. We'll see you back here Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on that. All right, we're going to take some of your comments. We'll get a chance to get an official pick here coming up in a moment for our best bets for the weekend. That's the entirety of the DawgNation team, plus our buddy Dari Payro, and our official picks for what counts on the standings. Alabama hosting South Carolina. All of this kind of a lead-in to the show that comes up later on today. It's Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, as we make our picks from a point spread perspective on all the big games of the weekend. Make sure you check all of that out. Okay, so let's pop over here. We'll get some comments. We'll see what's on everybody's mind, and we'll get you ready to roll into the rest of your Football Friday and your, weekend. Chris Slim White pointing out the basketball team got a big recruiting victory the other day. Yeah, I saw something about this, but admittedly I didn't know what it was. But I was actually talking to a guy this week who's kind of involved in SEC basketball. We were talking about the fact that there is no doubt. Now, I don't know what it adds up to this year. I really don't. Is it a tournament team or not? I'm not quite so sure. But there's no doubt that Mike White has greatly upgraded the talent level at UGA. That is not in dispute. So, Chris, I'm glad you pointed that out because it was a nice win for him. And, so you love to see that. Philip Jordan Wells and the idea of Vandy also beating Texas. Yeah, let me try to speak English. I'm not even sure they beat Kentucky tomorrow. But there is something going on with them that's kind of real. Like almost winning a road game at Missouri, beating Alabama. Their one loss was, kind of a miracle deal. And I realize it is Georgia State, but, there's something going on there. Let's see what else. Travis McCullough says they might be ranked by the end of October. Yeah, you never know. Let's see what else. Our buddy Ryan Walker in here. You'd love to see that. Tennille Calvino in here today. Love to see. I feel like we hadn't seen Tennille. Kent Holcomb says a great video by Cody. Yeah, sure enough. I like trying to support my teammates when I can, but Cody does a great job with that. And that's one of those things where that's a lot more work than it seems. Because, a few years ago, I was doing some hype videos. It's a lot more work than it seems. The thing that Cody's really good at doing is shooting the video that airs for them. That's a very hard thing to do. he has a real talent for that. And there's no doubt, since Cody's been a part of he's not here today, so I'm not buttering him up. But there's no doubt that the video that we're showing on the screen during our show on a regular basis is just much, much better than it's ever been before because we just have more of it. And Cody's just really good at shooting it. It's one of those things where, like, you would think that just pointing the camera in the direction of the football field and magic would happen, but it doesn't quite work out that way. You know, like last year I told you all this, that I was like, okay, because I'm always trying to, like, improve my skill set. You know, I want to be able to do a lot of different things. You know, you don't want to just sort of, you know, rest on your laurels. You want to have some skills. So I was like, I'm going to learn how to be a videographer, I guess you would call it. I'm going to go video these games. Not like the highlights, but just like the sort of in what we call B-roll in the industry. I'm just going to go shoot some of that. It's not that I didn't expect to be great at it, but it's even harder than I anticipated it would be because sometimes it sort of feels like you're always in the wrong place. You're trying to shoot something here, but the action's over here. You're just never quite where you're supposed to be. But somehow every single game, Cody comes back with a lot of great video. He's just really good at that. And Jay and the entire team here does a great job of incorporating that into the stuff that we're doing. So that's heartfelt and genuine for me. William Camacho says, can't wait to see you at the UGA bookstore after the game tomorrow. William, I'm looking forward to seeing you there as well. Lucy Bowers-Boykin says, what are laurels? Rest on your laurels. Yeah, I don't know how many laurels I've actually gotten, unfortunately. I am available for laurels. I just don't know that I've actually had any laurels extended to me. Let us see what else. Yeah, a couple of folks there on YouTube kind of mentioning some of the people I hadn't seen in a little while here. Yeah, so hopefully we'll have them check in here at some point in time. Oh, how about this? So Jay Black, I always thought like a laurel was just a compliment, but he says a laurel was a wreath that the ancient Greeks would have awarded. And you see that sometimes, right? Those little flowery looking things. So yeah, the laurel was actually a wreath. I didn't know that. That's pretty good. Andrew Hughes, going back to Diego Pavia, said he'd never been in front of a camera before, and he may never be again, but you got to make it count. Yeah, I mean, like, I've got so much respect for that dude. Somebody compared him the other day to Stetson Bennett, and I think there is a fair comparison there. Like, there is just something about having a quarterback that's as much of a street fighter as anybody on the roster is. Like, there's just something about that. And, I mean, like, Pavia was at New Mexico State. And, you know, some of us, we watch these, like, Sun Belt games on a Tuesday night or MAC games, and we see those teams kind of playing the bigger teams. And obviously last year they upset Auburn. But most of the time it's just kind of like New Mexico State is the sort of football team that kind of exists in our periphery a little bit. We don't really think that much about them. But I want you to ponder this for a moment. Think about how hard it would be to play college football at New Mexico State. Like really think about that. That is like, I mean, I hate to say it this way, and this is going to come across as disrespectful, but that's like last chance you. Like that's your last chance to play major college football, and if that doesn't work out, it's time to go be a construction worker. I mean, like, you know, like it's just like that is your last shot at football that's played on television, and anything else after that is just, you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda about what your athletic career could have been. Like that is not a not a glamorous life. Las Cruces, New Mexico, that is not a glamorous life. Everybody there wants to be somebody else, somewhere else. And from those sort of humble beginnings, Pavia gets himself into the SEC, and he beat Auburn last year and beat Alabama this year. I mean, I got a lot of respect for that. I really do. I really do. I believe Paul Moon's in here talking about the alternate uniforms. So let me tell you the alternate uniform I'd like to see Georgia wear. I know we all kind of complain about the breeches not being true silver, but the sort of grayish color they are now, I think that color jersey with the classic red Georgia helmet, I think that would be a good look. I think that'd be a good look. Our buddy, who's our guy that always – Hunter, it's Hunter, right? Hunter Jones, I believe his name is. He always does the great uniform mock-ups. You got to do one of those. I think that's pretty sharp. Jonathan Aaron also says if Florida beats the Fighting Mustard Bottles tomorrow, do you think that'll save Sunbelt Billy's job? Oh, yeah. Most programs don't want to fire their coach, especially in the case of Florida, because if Napier gets fired, Strickland, the AD, is probably getting fired as well. So any excuse they have not to fire their coach, they're going to take it. If they beat Tennessee, Napier's coming back next year. He probably is. I don't think that Florida will win the game, but do I think it could be somewhat closer? Perhaps that's the case. By the way, also in the black jerseys, I still believe that the black jerseys work great as a fashion statement. Hey, it's a cool look. It's obviously a traditional school color for Georgia. You know, Kirby this week sort of pushed back on them from a motivational standpoint, and I completely agree with him for that. That idea tainted and tarnished all time in Georgia's history. And I love Mark Richt, and we had a great time last week looking back on the first blackout. But obviously the subsequent events make that, hey, we're going to wear the black jerseys and be fired up and be motivated. You know, that's just kind of tarnished in Georgia's football history. It just is. But as a fashion choice, they just look good. The black and the red's a great contrast with each other. It just looks good. The Derek 1972 says, who's going to be our quarterback next year? I don't know. I believe that Gunnar Stockton has to be considered the favorite right now, but I don't know for sure. It'll obviously be an open competition. But I believe that Stockton is the favorite. Roger Hall says he liked the uniforms they wore at Arkansas in 2020. Yeah, that was the old school red pant with the white jersey. That's a great contrast with each other, too. Almost everybody loved those. It's kind of a shame they don't wear those more because everybody loved those. Savannah Bryan would like that as a permanent road uniform. I wouldn't mind that. But the one thing I've always sort of said, though, is that I don't want Georgia to wear a different uniform every week. I just don't want that. And I know some people would. You have a right to want what you want. I'm just telling you my preference. I don't mind an alternate uniform, but I wouldn't want, hey, it's a new uniform every week. And for whatever reason, you know how people talk about a slippery slope sometimes? You hear this in like politics, for instance. Oh, that's a slippery slope. So for me, and this is way more serious than this topic deserves to be, but I am being honest with you. For me, I would be a no vote on red pants, white jerseys on the road as a common look, because to me that's a slippery slope where if you do that, pretty soon you're also wearing red on red at home. And for whatever reason, I don't want Georgia to do that. I don't know why. I just don't want that. I think that some of these teams, that sort of feels like something that NC State would do with a similar color pattern. I just think that red on red, I know the recruits like it, and the recruits like the all whites. Like I realize this is a tired topic. And, you know, I come across as, you know, the Gen Xer I probably am. But I don't want like red on red and every week there's an announcement about the uniform combination. So I would be a no vote on white jerseys, red pants on the road as the common look, even though I love the way it looks together, simply because I believe it's a slippery slope, which probably drives some of y'all crazy, but it is my honest truth. SEM Dog says, allow him the privilege of extending me a laurel and a hearty handshake. SEM, I'll take that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's very funny. DT says that Jim Donnan era had some bad unis. Yeah, I love Coach Donnan. Do not like the black stripe. It just looks terrible. It just I don't know why. It just looks bad. It just does. Looks bad. And you know, Georgia wore black pants in the Florida game, 98. That didn't look great either. You know, you had Bill Goldberg lead him out of the field that day. By the way, Bill Goldberg is going to the Georgia-Florida Hall of Fame this year. That's going to be fun. That's going to be so much fun. Love to see him going to the Hall of Fame. That's really fun. But, yeah, don't like the black stripe. You know, much love to Coach Donnan, but don't like the black stripe. And did not love seeing Georgia get dragged up and down the field wearing black pants against Florida in 2000, or it would have been 1998. However, I will say this. people forget the worst uniform day in Georgia football history. Everybody brings up the spacesuit they wore in 2011 against Boise State, which was bad. Georgia got, splattered by a group of 5 team in the Georgia Dome. That was not fun. But for my money, the worst thing ever, I don't know why I hate this so bad. The 2009 Georgia-Florida game when they wore the black helmets, the black pants, just like, good Lord. It was sort of like like the film franchise you love, but they make like a 3rd sequel and it's like the worst movie you've ever seen. Like, that's what this was for me. It's like, okay, 2007 Blackout, that's like the original Rocky. 2008 Blackout, that's like Rocky 5. 2009 black pants, black helmet, that might as well be, I don't even know what. So, yeah, there you go. Yes, Savannah Bryant also hated those uniforms against Boise State. Yeah, most people did. That was really bad. Savannah Bryant also says that what they wore in 2009 looked like Grambling. It sort of did. It just didn't look like Georgia. And I will take this to my grave. Back then there was no DawgNation Daily. Yeah, there you go. Great work by Jay Black. So, total confession, this picture makes them look better than they actually were. Because some of y'all who are a little bit too young to remember this, that looks pretty good to me. I'm telling you right now, this picture makes them look better than they were. And you got to also keep in mind here, this was a game in which Georgia got, punched in the face from the word go. So, yeah, this picture right here makes them seem better than they are. It's an accurate picture. I'm not saying it's fake news. I'm just saying this does not tell the tale of how irritated I was when Georgia came out in this uniform to get absolutely splattered by Florida in an era that most of us would like to forget. So, yeah, now there we go. That's 1998. There's Kirby Smart coming out. Not pictured. Bill Goldberg let him out of the locker room that day. But there you go, Kirby in the black pants. Honestly, that looks like some Dickies work pants. Just looks like they're, that doesn't even look like a football pant. Looks just like, like a work pant or something like that. Also a game in which Georgia didn't play particularly well. There's the black stripe too. Not a fan. Not a fan. But to oh, by the way, Brandy Hall compliments my pullover. I appreciate that. I think it's kind of pullover weather today, maybe. Also, I'll say this, which is I'll go to my grave thinking this, that if we had DawgNation Daily back in 2011, I'd be on here screaming about this. Sometimes I wish that we had DawgNation Daily for some of this stuff that I could just be on here just screaming about. The uniforms that Georgia wore against Boise State were so bad that they actually had a tangible impact on the game. Because if you were at the Georgia Dome that day, I felt like the environment was pretty subdued. Mostly Georgia fans. They weren't really making noise. And my theory is that when Georgia got down to Boise State, in the mind of a lot of Georgia fans, they looked down there, they saw this unrecognizable uniform, and it didn't look like Georgia to them. Like the kind of visceral response you would have watching your team play, if they're wearing a uniform that's so unrecognizable, you don't have that. You just don't. And I've always kind of wondered why some of these teams that wear different uniforms every week, how frequently does Coca-Cola change its logo? They just don't do that very much. You protect your brand at all costs. But when you wear all these different uniforms, you're flipping channels. You can't even tell which team is which sometimes. All right, let's do – we got to do our picks here. I even teased it earlier, and I still almost forgot. All right, let's do this. We're going to roll out of the show here. We got Go With the Flow coming up starting at noon. On demand anytime after that. Your chance to watch all of our official picks from the point spread perspective. You can check all that out there, including can Georgia cover a gigantic number against Mississippi State? I've already given you a little bit of a hint about my feelings on that. But the entire DawgNation team plus Dari Payro will give you our thoughts on that. Oklahoma, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, all of that, of course, on the way. But for now, let's give you a taste of what that's going to sound like. It's our official pick for Alabama, South Carolina, our best bets for the weekend. We give you all of that right now as a lead-in to Go With the Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. And speaking of R.S. Andrews, make sure you check them out online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. If I'm wearing long sleeves today, that means heating system season's coming up here. Cold weather means getting comfortable in the inside of your house. And if you're worried about your heating unit not being ready to go for that, get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs so you can know for sure that it will be. Find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, y'all enjoy this. A little taste to go with the flow. I will say goodbye to you as well. Back tomorrow, DawgNation game day throughout the day. Kaylee's got your pregame. I'll see you for the DawgNation postgame show live from the UGA bookstore when it's all said and done. Tonight on the Peachtree Sports Network, streaming in the Atlanta News First for Milton and Gainesville. Of course, if that's not enough, back here Monday, DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Hello, DawgNation Daily viewers. Of course, we appreciate you being a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down every Friday and every day here on DawgNation Daily. And, of course, we also remind you that R.S. Andrews also brings Go With The Flow to you each and every Friday there as well. That's our chance, the DawgNation team, Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews, to make the picks on the biggest games of the weekend from a point spread perspective. Make sure you check out Friday's edition of the show. It airs starting at noon and then on demand anytime after that for thoughts on Georgia and Mississippi State, Oklahoma and Texas, Florida and Tennessee, Ohio State and Oregon. Some really good games this weekend, and we're picking all of those there. And to give you an idea of what that sounds like, what it looks like, we want to do the same thing for you here right now as we look at South Carolina, fresh off a pretty disappointing home performance against Ole Miss, in which they were handled easily, now going on the road to face an Alabama team reeling from an even more disappointing loss, one of the most embarrassing in recent SEC history, traveling to Nashville and losing straight up to the Vanderbilt Commodores here and casting a lot of doubt on where things stand in the Kalen DeBoer era, fresh off a couple of weeks ago, in which the Crimson Tide are riding high after beating Georgia. All of that backstory makes this game a very difficult one to predict. Half point perhaps looms large here there as well, as the Crimson Tide host the Gamecocks as a 21.5-point favorite. Mike Griffith, I come to you. What do you want to do here with Alabama minus 21.5 at home against the Gamecocks?
Second easiest SEC pick on the board. Take the Tide.
So Mike Griffith, they're solidly on Alabama. Jeff, how about for you?
Interesting here. I liked a lot of things about this game. I really believe there's not going to be this stimuli around Alabama that, the fervor and what they've heard and to appease the fan base that they'll play much better. I just think they're better than South Carolina. If this game was in Columbia and Williams-Brice, I might think a little bit about it, but I think over the course of time, I think Alabama's team is going to weigh in to be a stronger team than South Carolina. I don't know if it's going to be easy, but I think Alabama will eventually stack up that 22-point win plus. So give me the Tide.
Boy, making it sound easy right now. Connor, is it that easy for you?
I don't know. There are way better games out there to be picked than this one. This is a snoozer of a game, and I don't think that anything is going to be.
Well, guess what, Hotshot? You're going to have you're picking any game on the board here coming up in a moment. So you better give me nothing but winners.
I will take Alabama in this spot. South Carolina doesn't look right, and Lenore Sellers doesn't look right. And with that offense, I just can't trust them there, even with Dylan Double Pump Stewart on the defensive side for the Gamecocks. So in a snoozer where the B in Alabama stands for boring, give me the Crimson Tide here and the points.
There you go. So it's a lot of Bama love here right now. Kaylee, the number's 21.5. What do you want to do?
Yeah, I'm going to take Bama for a similar reason that I took Tennessee. Home field advantage. You're looking for a big bounce back here. There is a new sort of pressure on Kalen DeBoer. I expect them to rise to the occasion. I'm going to take the Crimson Tide.
Boy, y'all are making it easy. I mean, y'all are just making it so easy. I just toss it out there, and y'all all take the bait. Listen, this is an Alabama team from about midway through the second quarter against Georgia all the way through the game against Vanderbilt is showing itself to have some real problems. Now, South Carolina is not a, dominant team here necessarily, but Connor mentioned him by name a moment ago. The best defensive player in this game plays for South Carolina, I believe. I believe it's Dylan Stewart here. 21.5 is a gigantic number. I like the Gamecocks plus the points here. And I think that Alabama is the worst kind of fool's gold here in this spot, at least from a point spread perspective. So the flow heavily on the side of the Crimson Tide here. Dari, you want to join me on the winning side, though, and take South Carolina plus the points?
Man, I mean, I will tell you something. Like, the Gamecocks do have some trends that are working in their favor. Top 10 teams off a road loss where they were a 14-point or more favorite are just 9-17 against the spread in their next game. So history's kind of on your side to take the Gamecocks here. But I'm just in the bucket that it's just unfortunate for South Carolina that they're going to get this pissed off Bama team that's going to be looking to try to really light up that scoreboard to somehow justify their loss to Vandy. So I'm going to take Bama here to cover that number.
Really, really interesting action there in the SEC there on Saturday. And now for, as Connor calls them, the better games. Anything you want to pick, side, total, anything, it's all available to you here right now, as many of them as you want to give me. Mike Griffith, I'll come to you to begin with here. How about some best bets for the weekend outside the games we're picking for our season-long standings?
Easiest SEC pick on the board. Missouri goes to UMass, gives 27.5 points. Last year's SEC Coach of the Year, Eli Drinkwitz, is going to be eager to make amends for a flat-footed showing last week when they got dominated by Texas A&M. Take Missouri, give 27.5 points. The Show Me State is going to show you the money. And then in another pick that I think is really easy, Dabo Swinney and Clemson, they've been so good against the spread. Last week, a push. They're going to push right into this week and win you some money if you give 20 points in Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. Look for the Tigers to light up the Deacons.
Okay, so there you go. A couple of picks there from Mike. You may also hear from me about the game there in Amherst here coming up in just a moment, too. Jeff Sentell, how about some big best bets from you, too?
I got an interesting one. You know, right off the heels last week of my best bet, kind of calling for that tyranny that happened in Nashville between Vanderbilt and Alabama.
Yeah, to your credit, Jeff, before you make your pick, let me also say, to your credit, you were on Vanderbilt last week. Not obviously not straight up necessarily, but certainly plus the points. That was your best bet. I should have mentioned that already. Probably the most successful best bet pick of the year. So certainly deserving of taking a bow there for that. Very well done. Documented on the record on our show last week.
Thank you, sir. That was much more airtime than I ever thought I would get for that pick, including my 6-0 record from the week prior. So I'm going to say this. I want to ride the lightning with Vanderbilt a little bit. I think the most intriguing game that even a really intelligent soothsayer that likes to put his betting panel, odds maker panel through the ringer like Brandon does, I think Kentucky and Vanderbilt is really interesting. I've seen that at 14.5 now at Kroger Field. Now, I don't think Vandy is going to tear down some more goalposts or anything like that, but I think that's going to be a close game. I think Vandy has shown something. I just think Kentucky has the type of team physically, off defensive front-wise in the box to kind of deal with Vanderbilt's basically option attack. I like Vanderbilt here to cover that 14, but I think that's going to be a really interesting game that when you're really bored and you want to see what's going on in the SEC, that one might catch some air. That one might catch some good airtime for you for a little bit.
I 1,000,000% agree. I think it's a really fascinating game, and I don't have the guts to make the pick, but I do believe you're on the right side here. That zigzag theory would tell you, let down spot going on the road to Kentucky. Georgia always plays terribly there. That's kind of a hard place to play if you're a visitor. Plus the points, I do think Vanderbilt's probably the right side on Saturday, although I don't have the guts to make the pick myself. Connor, how about for you? You had a pretty big menu there a little earlier. What are you thinking here?
I'd just like to point out a couple of things here. One, Brandon was the only one that picked that Alabama-South Carolina game where he took South Carolina there. So just take note of that for next week in that game there. Two,
well, if you're going to give me the free win, of course I'm going to take it. I mean, I just dangle out some keys there, and y'all all go just sort of jumping after that. Of course I'm going to take the free win.
I would also like to point out that I had Clemson as a winner last week at 14.5. No push there on that number that I gave out. I've got 3 games for you here, different. And, you've got USC Penn State, which is an exciting game. Kansas State, Colorado, I'm very interested in as well. But for the games that I am picking for the best bets, you're guaranteed winners of the week. I've got Pitt minus 3.5 against Cal. Cal, I think, left it all out there on the field against Miami last week and has nothing left in the tank. And now they got to go across the country to go play Pitt. Body clock game. I like the Pitt Panthers there. Big favorite here. Shout out to Mike and Jeff. But I like Illinois this week minus 19.5. They're playing Purdue. Purdue might be the worst Power 4 team out there. They're getting drugged every single week. And then for my last game here, a couple different ways I want to go, but we're going to keep it off at 3. I like the Cincinnati Bearcats to go on the road to Central Florida and not just cover the 3-point spread, but win outright. Obviously, Central Florida's got a lot going on this week, and they have not looked all that impressive in back-to-back games against Colorado, against Florida. This is a really, really tough spot for them there. So I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bearcats +3 on the road against UCF.
I really like that pick. There is something wrong with UCF, and obviously the weather stuff is really serious, and I don't, when I reference this, I'm referencing on the field. They have really looked bad the last couple of weeks in a way that I would not have expected them to. All right, I have got 3. Actually, we've got to do Kaylee Mansell. I apologize. Kaylee, how about your best bets here for the weekend?
If anybody wants to take a best bet next week, you should take it on Braden skipping me in best bets. Second time it's happened this year, but it's fine. I get it. I actually have 2 this week. One, Mike has already mentioned. I like Clemson +20 over Wake Forest. This is a really weak ACC. Clemson offense has been rolling since the opening loss to Georgia, so I like them there. And also, this one might come back to bite me, but I feel good about this one. I like Georgia Tech 5.5 over North Carolina. North Carolina has just been a constant reminder this season that things could always get worse. You lose your transfer quarterback, season-ending injury. You lose 70-50 to James Madison. You blow a lead to Duke. You lost to Pitt last week. So I think that things are just going to keep continuing to get worse for North Carolina. So I like Georgia Tech at 5.5 here.
To back up Kaylee's point, UNC winless against the spread thus far this season. That is a team that has really fallen on hard times there. Although Tech 5.5-point favorites on the road. Be careful there at the Yellow Jackets, but the numbers certainly back up what Kaylee is saying. And to be fair to me here for a moment, for about 5 years, I've made my picks right after Connor on this show. The fact that I have so easily transitioned to bringing in another voice before I make mine, I'm actually somewhat impressed I've been able to do that as smoothly as I have been able to. But nonetheless, I have got 4 picks, 3 of which I'm officially going to give out here. Last week, I won my only bet. I had Washington -2.5 against Michigan. That was an easy one. However, this week, going to turn my back on the Huskies. The thought process last week was, top 10 team on the road, yet the home team was favored. Vegas trying to tell you something. Vegas trying to tell you something again now, because Washington, fresh off a win, travels to Iowa, fresh off a blowout loss to Ohio State. Seems like it should be easy. Iowa, though, they're in Kinnick Stadium, favored by 2.5. I'm going to trust the odds makers on this and take the Hawkeyes minus the 2.5 there in that spot. Another game that Connor mentioned, Colorado, which actually has played, by record anyway, pretty well thus far this season, but they run into the best coaching staff they've seen all year long. A lot of respect for Chris Kleiman, one of the ranked teams in the Big 12 here right now. Kansas State in Boulder sees itself as a 4.5-point favorite. I think that's actually a pretty small number for 2 teams that I see a chasm of difference between. A lot of more star power on the Colorado side, but just better football on the Little Apple side. I'll take Kansas State minus the 4.5. Mike mentioned Missouri. Hard to imagine a worse situation for them. Blown out in College Station, and now they have to travel all the way to Amherst, Massachusetts to see themselves as about a 4-touchdown favorite there against a terrible UMass team. I have no idea about the spread in this. It's a high-variance game. I would not touch it. But I love the under 54.5 between UMass and Missouri. Flat spot for Missouri. UMass essentially a flat program. I don't see a lot of action here. I love the under 54.5. So officially, I've got Kansas State -4.5, Iowa -2.5, under 54.5, Missouri, UMass. I'll also tell you this. This is not an official pick because I don't quite have the same level of confidence. But I really like USC +4.5 against Penn State on Saturday. Up to number 4 in the AP poll. In fact, let me make this a pick. I'm going to give you 4. I like USC +4.5 against Penn State. Up to number 4 in the AP poll. Softest schedule in America here thus far. USC reeling after another loss there on Saturday. But it's a long travel. It's a Penn State team that, couldn't squash a grape against anybody of note. I think that USC is the right side +4.5. So let me add USC +4.5 to under 54.5, Missouri, UMass, Iowa -2.5, Kansas State -4.5. Dari Payro, how about for you?
Yeah, I'm starting to get in a groove on my best bet picks here. I like New Mexico. Air Force is going at New Mexico. Last week, I told you Navy, love Navy. They blew out Air Force. It's a really bad Air Force team. Now they have to go on the road. You got Bronco Mendenhall, who's the coach at New Mexico. It's only a 4.5-point favorite for the Lobos. I love that game. I also really love Maryland. You got Northwestern at Maryland. Maryland's 9.5-point favorite. Love that. And just for the excitement of it, the Magnolia Bowl, I'm going to take the over 63.5. There's going to be points, and there's nothing more fun than hitting overs with your bets.
You love that. It's the one bet you can win before the game's even over with, which is always exciting. All right, so good stuff there. Looking forward to a fun weekend. And with that, we'll invite you to check out the rest of our picks as a part of Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews and the DawgNation video channels. And we'll get you back now to the R.S. Andrews Cool Down as a part of DawgNation Daily.